Your disabled brat shouldn't be allowed in public!" Karen screamed at the top of her lungs, reaching into her expensive designer purse. Before I could reach my daughter to protect her, she pulled out a gun. The shot rang out across the schoolyard, echoing off the brick buildings. Blood immediately spread across my little girl's shirt as she collapsed to the ground near her walker, crying out in pain and confusion. What Karen didn't know in that moment was that this protective father standing before her was an ex-military ranger who had spent 6 years learning how to protect the innocent and fight for justice. Before I share this complete story with you, please comment below and let me know from which country you're watching. Also, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about standing up to bullies and Karens who think they're above the law. It started as just another ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when my entire life changed forever in the span of a few terrible seconds. I was sitting in my pickup truck outside Oakwood Elementary School, parked in my usual spot, waiting patiently for my daughter Abby to come out. She's 7 years old, bright, funny, and absolutely the bravest kid I've ever known. Abby has a form of muscular dystrophy that affects her legs and makes it difficult for her to walk without assistance. She uses a special walker to get around, one of those sturdy ones with wheels that helps her maintain her independence and mobility. Despite all the challenges she faces every single day, Abby has never let her condition define who she is. She's got the biggest smile, loves art class more than anything, and dreams of becoming a veterinarian someday. She's particularly fond of telling anyone who'll listen that just because her legs don't work the way other kids' legs do, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with her brain. And she's absolutely right about that. I always make sure to park in the exact same spot every afternoon, far enough away from the school entrance to let Abby feel independent and capable, but close enough that I can watch over her and make sure she's safe. That's the agreement we came to together after her mother passed away last year. Cancer took my wife from us after a brutal 6-month battle that was the worst period of our lives. But somehow, Abby and I got through it together. Now it's just the two of us against the world, and I'm determined to give her the best life possible despite everything we've been through. That particular Tuesday, I spotted Abby coming out of the big school doors right on schedule, her bright purple walker moving slowly but steadily as she carefully navigated the sidewalk. She had a huge smile on her face, probably excited to tell me all about her latest art project, knowing her. My heart swelled with pride watching her independence. That's when I first noticed the black luxury SUV parked illegally in the clearly marked no parking zone right in front of the school entrance. The woman inside was yelling angrily into her cell phone, her face bright red with fury about something. I recognized her immediately and my stomach sank. Patricia Summers, the president of our neighborhood homeowners association. Everyone in the neighborhood called her Patrol Pat behind her back because she was constantly on the lookout for any rule violations, no matter how minor. She'd send out fine notices for the smallest infractions: grass half an inch too tall, garbage cans left out 15 minutes too long, Christmas decorations still up on December 26th. She'd made enemies of half the neighborhood with her power trips. I watched with growing concern as Abby tried to navigate around the illegally parked SUV. The space between the vehicle and the curb was tight, and her walker accidentally bumped very lightly against the SUV's shiny chrome bumper. It wasn't hard enough to cause any damage whatsoever. I could see that clearly from where I sat, but Patricia noticed immediately. She threw her car door open violently, almost hitting Abby in the process, and jumped out. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed loudly, making other parents and children turn to stare. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs? This is a $60,000 vehicle." Abby froze in place, her eyes going wide with fear. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said in a small, frightened voice. "I didn't mean to touch your car. I was just trying to get past." "You little brat." Patricia got right in Abby's face, leaning down aggressively. "You scratched my car. Your parents are going to pay for this." I was already moving, pushing my way quickly through the crowd of parents and kids who had stopped to watch. I was maybe 20 feet away when Patricia reached into her expensive leather purse. My blood ran cold when I saw what she pulled out. A small black handgun. "Hey!" I shouted as loud as I could. "Put that down right now!" Several parents screamed. Children started crying. Abby tried desperately to back away from the gun, but her walker got stuck on the edge of the curb, and she couldn't move. What happened next still plays in my nightmares every single night. I see it over and over again when I close my eyes. Patricia waved the gun around wildly, pointing it directly at my 7-year-old daughter. "This will teach you to respect other people's property," she screamed. Whether she meant to actually pull the trigger or if it was an accident, I'll never know for certain. But the gun went off with a sharp crack that echoed across the entire schoolyard. Abby screamed, a sound I'll never forget as long as I live, and fell to the ground as her walker toppled over beside her. I ran the last few steps and dropped to my knees beside her, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Blood was spreading rapidly across her school t-shirt from a wound on her shoulder. The bullet had grazed her, not a direct hit, thank God, but she was still bleeding heavily. Too much blood for such a small body. "Daddy," she whispered, her face going pale with shock and pain. "The lady shot me. Why did she shoot me?" Patricia stood there frozen, staring at the gun in her hand like she couldn't believe what had just happened. Then she dropped the weapon and ran back to her SUV. She was pulling away from the curb before anyone could stop her, tires squealing as she fled the scene. "Someone call 911, I yelled desperately, pressing my jacket firmly against Abby's wound to try to slow the bleeding. "And somebody get that license plate number." The next few hours were an absolute blur of terror and confusion. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing, the emergency room with its harsh fluorescent lights. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, cleaning and carefully stitching Abby's wound while I held her small hand and tried desperately not to completely fall apart in front of her. She was so incredibly brave through it all, barely crying even when they gave her multiple shots to numb the area around the wound. "You're doing great, sweetheart," I kept telling her. "So brave. I'm so proud of you." Officer Jenkins showed up while we were still at the hospital, probably 2 hours after the shooting. He took my statement and looked distinctly uncomfortable when I described in detail what had happened. "We've already picked up Mrs. Summers," he informed me. "She's in custody at the station." I felt a small sense of relief until he continued. "But I should tell you that her husband is very good friends with the police chief. Mrs. Summers is claiming it was an accident, that she felt genuinely threatened when your daughter damaged her vehicle. She's 7 years old and uses a walker," I said through clenched teeth, barely controlling my anger. "How in the world is that threatening to a grown woman?" Officer Jenkins looked down at his notepad, avoiding my eyes. "I'm just telling you what she said in her statement. There will be a full investigation, of course." "There were at least 20 witnesses," I pointed out, "and the school has security cameras covering that entire area. We'll look into all of it," he promised. But I could tell from his tone and body language that he was just going through the motions. He didn't sound like someone who was going to fight for justice. When we finally got home that night, Abby wouldn't let go of my hand for a second. She was terrified to be alone. "Is the angry lady going to come back?" she asked as I tucked her into bed, her voice small and frightened. "No, sweetheart," I promised, kissing her forehead. "I won't let her hurt you again. Ever." But even as I said the words, I wasn't completely sure I could keep that promise. The next morning, I learned that Patricia had been released without having to post any bail. The news spread quickly through our neighborhood's Facebook group and text chains. My neighbor Tom knocked on our door around noon. "Thought you should know," he said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Patricia is telling everyone that Abby attacked her and that she was just defending herself, and some people are actually believing her story." "How can anyone possibly believe that?" I asked, absolutely stunned. "There were dozens of witnesses who saw exactly what happened." Tom shook his head sadly. Her husband, Robert, has a lot of pull in this town. They've lived here for 20 years, host fancy dinner parties for the mayor and city council members, and donate generously to all the right charities. They're connected. He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. And what? I pressed. What else? And some people in the neighborhood don't like that the school lets special needs kids attend regular classes with other students, he admitted. They think it slows down the class and holds their kids back. My blood absolutely boiled at that. Abby was one of the smartest kids in her entire grade. Her body might not work the way other kids' bodies do, but her mind was as sharp as a tack. She got straight A's and loved learning. What am I supposed to do? I asked Tom. Just sit here and wait for the police to decide that Patricia's connections are more important than my daughter's safety? Tom put his hand on my shoulder. You were in the military, right? Before you became a construction foreman? I nodded. 6 years as an Army Ranger, including 2 deployments overseas. I wasn't a sniper like some people assumed when they heard about my service. But I definitely knew my way around weapons and tactics. I'd been trained to assess situations and respond appropriately. Then you know that sometimes you have to fight smart, not just fight hard, Tom said. Patricia has power and connections, that's true. But she also has secrets. People like her always do. You just have to find them. He was absolutely right about that. That night, after Abby finally fell asleep, I stayed up late doing research on my laptop. Patricia and her husband, Robert, had lived in our neighborhood for 20 years. He worked as a bank manager at the biggest bank in town, and she ran the HOA with an iron fist. They had no kids of their own, just a spotless showcase house and a reputation for making enemies of anyone who crossed them. The next day, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and drove down to the courthouse to look up public records. What I found was very interesting. Patricia had been sued 3 separate times by former neighbors for harassment, threats, and intimidation. But all 3 cases had been mysteriously dropped before ever going to trial. I made notes of the names and planned to contact these people. The HOA financial records, which were public documents, showed administrative expenses that seemed to match up perfectly with dates when Patricia and Robert took expensive vacations to Europe and the Caribbean. Most importantly, I discovered that Patricia's gun permit had been initially denied twice before finally being approved. The final approval came just 2 weeks after Robert's bank approved a substantial loan for the police chief's vacation home. That seemed like quite a coincidence. I wasn't the only one digging for the truth. The school principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, called to tell me that other parents were organizing to support Abby. The school security video clearly showed Patricia pulling the gun first, unprovoked. The local newspaper ran a small article about the incident, carefully avoiding details that would make Patricia look bad, probably because Robert advertised his bank heavily in their pages. But the online comment section was filled with people who had actually witnessed what happened, and they weren't holding back. A week after the shooting, Patricia and Robert hosted an emergency HOA meeting at their house. I wasn't invited, of course, but Tom went and secretly recorded everything on his phone. Patricia spent 20 minutes talking about how dangerous the school pickup area is, Tom reported to me afterwards, shaking his head in disbelief. She actually said that kids with special equipment like walkers and wheelchairs should have a separate pickup time so they don't endanger other children and damage people's vehicles. She said what? I couldn't believe the audacity. When Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street pointed out that Patricia was the one who brought a gun to a school, Robert immediately asked her if she wanted to be fined for her mailbox that needs repainting. But Patricia had made a critical mistake. By making the shooting an official HOA matter and discussing it at a formal meeting, she'd opened the door for me to request all related communications under the HOA transparency rules that she herself had always enforced so strictly against others. Her emails, which I obtained legally, revealed that she'd been complaining about that crippled girl for months, saying that Abby made the neighborhood look bad and was lowering property values. The evidence of her prejudice and hatred was right there in black and white. I took everything I'd found, all the documents, the emails, the financial records, to Detective Sarah Moore, who had been assigned to the case after I filed a formal complaint about Officer Jenkins's handling of the investigation. She listened carefully to everything I had to say, took copies of all my evidence, and promised to look into it thoroughly. "This won't be easy," she warned me honestly. "The Summers family has a lot of powerful friends in this town. But what happened to your daughter was completely wrong, and I can't ignore evidence of a possible cover-up. I have a daughter of my own. I'd want someone to fight for her." 3 days later, Patricia was arrested again, this time on much more serious charges. Assault with a deadly weapon, illegal possession of a firearm. The gun had been modified to have a hair trigger, which was against the law, and misuse of HOA funds. The evidence was too strong for even her powerful connections to overcome. The hardest part of everything wasn't dealing with Patricia or the legal system. It was helping Abby feel safe again in the world. She had terrible nightmares about the gun lady for weeks. She would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. She didn't want to go back to school. She didn't want to play outside. The physical scar on her shoulder was healing, but the emotional scars were much deeper. The fear I saw in her eyes every day broke my heart into pieces. Slowly, gradually, things began to improve. Abby's classmates sent her cards and drawings. Her teacher, Miss Williams, came to visit our house several times, bringing books and assignments so Abby wouldn't fall behind in her schoolwork. Our neighbors, the good ones, organized a meal train so I wouldn't have to worry about cooking while taking care of Abby. Tom's wife started a fundraiser online to help with the medical bills that were piling up. Within a week, the community had raised over $15,000. 2 months after the shooting, Patricia's trial finally began. Her fancy, expensive lawyer tried his best to paint her as a respectable community leader who had made a simple mistake in a moment of fear. He showed photographs of her volunteer work and letters from people praising her HOA leadership. But the evidence told a completely different story. The illegally modified gun with the hair trigger. The long history of harassment and discrimination. The emails called Abby cruel names that no child should ever be called. The financial records show HOA fund misuse. When it was Abby's turn to testify, I worried she would be too scared to speak. The thought of her having to face Patricia again terrified me. But my brave little girl sat in the witness stand, looked directly at Patricia without flinching, and told the complete truth about what happened that day. "I didn't mean to bump her car," she said clearly. "I said sorry right away, but she was very angry. She called me bad names. Then she took out a gun and said she would teach me a lesson. I was really scared and tried to get away, but my walker got stuck on the curb. Then she shot me." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge looked emotional. The jury took just 3 hours to find Patricia guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for at least 5 years. Robert sold their house and quietly moved away the following month. I heard he transferred to another bank in a different state. Our neighborhood changed dramatically after that trial. The new HOA board, led by Tom, created strict new rules against harassment and discrimination of any kind. The school installed better security cameras and hired a professional crossing guard to help kids safely navigate the pickup area. Abby slowly, gradually regained her confidence, though she still sometimes woke up crying from nightmares about that terrible day. One evening, about a year after the shooting, Abby and I sat together on our front porch swing. She'd had a wonderful day at school. She got an A on her science project about planets, and she'd been invited to a classmate's birthday party that weekend. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, leaning against my shoulder, "do you think bad people can ever change and become good?" I thought carefully about Patricia sitting in prison, about all the damage and pain she'd caused, not just to us, but to so many others over the years. "I think some people can change if they want it badly enough," I told her honestly. "But the important thing is that good people stand up to bad people when they hurt others. That's how we make the world a little bit better." Abby nodded thoughtfully. Like you stood up for me. I'll always stand up for you, sweetheart, I promised. But you stood up for yourself, too. Telling the truth in that courtroom even when it was scary, that was incredibly brave. She smiled and held up her arm, showing me where the scar had faded to just a thin white line. My teacher says this is my superhero mark, she said proudly. It shows I'm stronger than the bad things that happened to me. I hugged her close, blinking back tears of pride and love. Sometimes the world is cruel to innocent children. Sometimes the system protects the wrong people because of money and connections. But that evening, sitting on our porch with my healing daughter beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope that Abby would be okay, though I knew she would be, but hope that by standing together against cruelty and injustice, by refusing to back down when powerful people try to intimidate us, we all might make the world just a little bit better for the next generation. Abby squeezed my hand. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in this world. We sat together as the sun set, watching the neighborhood kids play in their yards, and I knew that despite everything we'd been through, we were going to be just fine. Thank you for watching this story. If you believe in standing up for what's right, please like this video and share it with others. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. And please comment below with where you're watching from. Your support means everything to families like ours who've had to fight for justice. God bless you all.